everyone to the second day of this conference, Creative Alternatives to Capitalism. I remember the first moment of its inception, precisely what you discussed yesterday, David, that you were approached by this idea of, creative economies and saying, like, why don't we discuss alternatives, really, creative alternatives to it. And I think, when you asked me to work around this panel, the first thing that came into my mind was to discuss, an alternative that several people that I know and several people here in New York, having trying to construct. Doesn't mean that it's there. It means that it's been quite a struggle, but it really points out to a very different form of understanding urban growth. This panel specifically was supposed to be at 1:30, and because of my fault of scheduling issues, I moved it I didn't move it, they helped me move this so Marina and Citrin that was going to carry the next one. Thank you very much. Also, thanks a lot to Mary, and sincerely, I think she did such an amazing job to organize all of this. Where's Mary? She's not here, but okay, it's good. Okay, sorry. Yeah. And David, what can I say? I think it's always fascinating to be in New York, and one of the reasons it's fascinating is because of the Center for Place, Culture and Politics. It just puts together this amazing programming all the time, seminars, etc. So I assume you're here because you follow it, you follow what happens at the Center for Place, Culture and Politics. So my name is Miguel Robles Duran. I call myself an urbanist, and whatever that means, I would say, because that I think all of us in many ways are that. And for several years, been busy trying to work at what we would call sort of, instead of the design of the planning or the formal issues of the city, focus or enter more into the design of processes, of contradictions. So I know that sounds like a contradiction itself, the design of contradictions, how can you produce that? But in a ways to try to emphasize and to develop strategies or tactics that could engage in rupturing certain processes of the capitalist state or the capitalist sort of intentions, specifically in urban environments. And so it came with the idea of organizing as a sort of form of no-profit. I don't like to call ourselves non-profit because it's a different sort of type of organization, but it's a no-profit sort of type of organization that works either with foundations, and recently we've been working a lot with governments in areas where there's high levels of urban conflict and crisis. When we have realized that when we get called, by some person in the government, that they don't have a clue what to do with the current condition of the city. In many ways, we know that most of the cities are in decay. The conditions of the people that live in them obviously are in decay. And there's some like a desperate cry for figuring out how to work around these issues. Our response has always been, well, we have to destroy the speculation, and we have to, function more as a way of giving a different source of value to the things that we do in the city. Now, one of the things that we've always encountered, and I think it alludes a lot to a lot of debate that happened at the end of the 60s, early 70s. And that debate, to my knowledge, and perhaps it exists in other fields, but began actually with Henri Lefebvre, this sort of French philosopher that wrote a lot about the city, and also with David Harvey in one of his first sort of books, if not his first book, it was called Social Justice in the City. David is here. I always try to tell him that book, in many ways, is fundamental to understand sort of why cities operate the way they are today. And both books, in this case, Lefebvre first with the La Révolution Urbaine, the urban revolution, and then the production of space. And David's in his first chapter. These texts discuss, without you guys knowing about each other in many ways, begin to discuss one of the problems of that we face, which is the issue of fragmentation within our own sort of disciplines and our own practices and our sort of professionalisms. Lefebvre says that clearly the city cannot be conceptualized in one single disciplinary point, disciplinary line. David really emphasizes in this first chapter sort of the problem with the fragmentation between disciplinary apparatuses. I mean, contrasting, of course, the problems within the social science, that social sciences tend to look at the city in many fragments. And in many ways, they're heralding already to what I believe was going to be, or the challenge that neoliberalism was trying to put forward. I mean, when Lefebvre wrote La Révolution Urbaine, I think it was at the end of the 60s, I don't remember, 69 or something like that, and he already is using the term neoliberalism, actually quite a lot in his book. He argues that one of the issues that we face is that we are right now facing that the city is this illusion that we tend to believe that the city is sort of a unified type of situation. You know, we can see it, we can grasp it in the way that we see all its processes. But when it's about talking about it or practicing within it, that illusion breaks, you know, when we walk through it. The illusion of this unity, you know, that mirror, you know, that becomes sort of the city, as Lefebvre and David and also Marx mentioned at some point, the issue that the city becomes the perfect mirror of capitalism. You know, I mean, the city is actually the best representation of, you know, the dominant political economy at the time. And within these issues of what they call the fragmentation or the specialization, I mean, you tend to understand that our formal education, our way of practicing, and has been structured around these sort of silos. And the issue of silos is nothing new. I've been in several conferences here in New York where the silos becomes like, you know, within nonprofit organizations that, you know, there's a silo of this, a silo of that, and I mean, we can see it even in the construction of the thematics that we did in this conference, right? I mean, that there's a silo of the housing, the silo of labor, the silo of this and this other one. And even within our consciousness of trying to think in more unitary ways, the construction of a mindset of how to organize always ends up, or not always, but most of the times ends up in very precise sort of spaces. You know? And this is what Lefebvre and David were sort of alluding to in this period at the time. That we didn't have any tools, and they clearly say this, we don't have any tools to conceptualize the city in a unitary form. And so for the more that we want, I mean, our disciplines just simply don't allow us. You know? And then one of the things that needed to be done was precisely to break those differences and mostly the fragments into units, if that's, you know, some type of metaphor that I can put on. And so within this structure, I started to look a lot in the ways of organizing within cities. And obviously, I have been always very attracted by the idea of labor unions. I mean, labor unions, we know that many times they come from these sort of reformist sides, you know, and yesterday a lot of that was discussed in the panel of labor. But my interest in labor unions has been mostly about the general psyche of organizing people. And where does it come from? So if I look back into one of the sort of more inspirational texts or sort of people that have discussed about unions, and without doubt, or labor unions, in my point of view, has been Gramsci. You know? So Gramsci has these issues about the councils, workers' councils, and remember that he wrote a lot about the Turin, you know, sort of workers' arrangements and how they organize and how they should be organized. And something always caught my attention within his texts. And I'm going to just very briefly read this little part where he says, this is a small text that is not in recent books. It's called Enthusiasm for the Councils. And he says, you know, the factory council must be formed according to the principle of organization by industry. Okay? So, and then he says, it must represent for the working class the model of a communist society at which we will arrive through the dictatorship of the proletariat. I mean, we know that level of discussion. But what caught my attention always when I'm reading Gramsci and other discussions on labor unions is this emphasis on what is the organization by industry. Now, I mean, again, you know, an emphasis of organizing by trade, which makes a lot of sense, right? I would love to be together with people of my kind that are going to the same sort of forms of repression and exploitation. And more or less the concepts of the unions have developed like this, and in many ways have been quite triumphant. In many ways they haven't, as we know, and many times yesterday was that point criticized. Now we are facing right now a situation where the efficacy that perhaps at a certain point the labor unions had it's been absolutely corroded by many sort of conditions of the advancement of the capitalist sort of enterprise. Yesterday, the opening of the conference, David mentioned a statistic that has always impressed me since I read it. And I read it in several newspapers, but the way it really impressed me is when I read it from Bill Gates. You know, that they're arguing that 50% of the service jobs that exist today in the whole world, right, would be lost to what David calls artificial intelligence. Bill Gates said to software, right? And of course, it goes into that. Now, I'm not sure we really understand, because what Bill Gates argued in this interview they made to him, that was a few weeks ago, it was that no government is prepared to actually, understand that 50% of the labor force won't be employed at all, right? Now, this is a huge sort of change on even the conceptualizing what the hell are labor unions. Yesterday, I really was quite attracted by the mention of Uber. We had a panelist that was from the taxi drivers union, and which has been incredibly important for the development of some type of support for taxi drivers here. But one of the battles that they're right now fighting is Uber. This this software where in your phone you can tap and then you can call the cab, etc. And he was saying, Uber, but if we really think further into it, I hate to be a pessimist, but there's no stopping Uber, right? And there's no stopping Google, to build these driverless cars, which yesterday California approved them, right? So that's a whole industry of drivers that's just going to be lost in the next 10 years or 15 years. But what I'm trying to allude to is that a lot of the organizing that we know how to do, again, tended to be into these issues of spaces of operation. I mean, there might be some jobs that would require the unions because they will be necessary, these other 50%, but many of them are suffering a lot of changes. And these changes, in many ways, do not adapt, I think, to the perverse sort of fragmentation that capitalist continues to operate on. So there is not sort of an equal process. There's a huge uneven development between the thinking of labor unions and the thinking, well, not thinking, I mean, just the advance of capitalism in terms of how it's fragmenting every single thing it touches. And in this case, the fragmentation, it also means, the discontinuation of jobs towards, of course, things that are more productive and less costly for the capitalist. Now, mentioning this, I think the very important part where I started to concentrate on is that Lefebvre, in the end of his book of the Urban Revolution, well, not at the end, there were several parts, he was mentioning if there was going to be a revolution, it was going to be an urban revolution, and he goes and saying for many reasons why the city, was the place for the next revolution. And since then, there have been many theories that have argued about the reconceptualization of the city into a unitary form. Also, again, clearly what Lefebvre mentions against fragmentation is unification. Now, within the formats of unification, etc., we also tend to understand, and this is something that I think David brought very, very interestingly in his book, The Rebel Cities, where he's discussing about organizing the whole city, right? We're continuing into this agenda that they brought from the 60s and the 70s into pushing us to rethink the possibilities that right now it's very dysfunctional, in many senses futile for the future of our sort of struggle to continue to emphasize the silos. And begin to understand that the producers of the city, and this is what David does very well in his Rebel Cities, the producers of the city are actually the producers that are the sweepers, the people that work on the garbage things. Pretty much all of us produce the city. And that's something that, again, in the visions of Lefebvre, that illusion, we normally cease to understand this, that the city somehow becomes, or is, as Lefebvre would say, the battleground. And within these contradictions, it also contains, I would say, its sort of liberation sort of format. And so the panel today, had to do with, is there or can we conceptualize ways of organizing the whole city? And the topic, or the term urban union, is a term that sort of came, in into mind. Of course, advancing on the work of many people working on labor issues. These forms of unions that can be quite organized. But I guess it also alludes to perhaps a new capacity that we all in the left need to really push for, which is get out of our comfort zones and really try not to compose organizations in the forms of alliances, but actually compose organizations that themselves organize around a lot of, let's say, the urban issues, which go beyond any sort of form of specialization at all. So what I've been asking a lot of people, and sometimes it's very controversial to discuss, is that one of the things that we must really always keep in front of us is that capitalism, at least in these last 40 years, has advanced to enormous specialization. And it is actually, in the view that we plan to discuss today, that it's against this specialization that we should be thinking about the formation of other, organizational forms. Sorry to say this. That discuss more the city as a whole, that take the city as its canvas. And when I ask, how do you do that? Because we're so used to organizing into these, specific silos, right? It becomes, I think, perhaps one of the biggest questions of the future of the left, because the right has learned how to do that very well. Organize at the level of the city, and I think we could see it with the apparatus, the political apparatus of Bloomberg or other mayors, that worked around. They really organize the whole city in their own sort of way. So for today's panel, that's the main question for Jeanne and for Theodore. And Jeanne van Heeswijk I have a lot of words to say about her, positive, of course. She is an artist, she's a visual artist that works in the Netherlands. She lives in Rotterdam. She, in my point of view, is one of the most sort of breakthrough visual artists in the world today, recognized widely very recently, we've received prizes and prizes and prizes. But what her work does is something quite distinct from what we will think of a visual artist. I mean, she's been trying to utilize the structure of the arts to organize whole cities. And she has been, in my point of view, one of the most successful people that I know that has actually managed to do it. I mean, not perhaps a whole city, but yes, a whole neighborhood, and even larger than a neighborhood. And organized in political, action within it. And that's her artistic practice. I mean, I was very excited when I heard that Janet was picked up by the Philadelphia Museum to be represented. So she represents the contemporary Marcel Duchamp. They're having a new exhibition celebration of Duchamp, I think 100 years or something. And the museum chose her as, the new Duchamp in many ways. And the reason for this is, is because, as we all know, Duchamp, shattered completely what art was, in this early 19th century, 20th century, 1910s, 12s, 13s, 11s. And so Jana is really bringing a very different conception of it, and she's come here to discuss and to talk about, her experiences in organizing a very large part of the city of Rotterdam. Also, we worked together in a project in the city of Bordeaux, where our organization invited Jane to help us organize a huge part of the city, and she ended up doing an amazing job in the part of Saint-Michel in Bordeaux, which is currently populated by a lot of immigrant groups, mostly Arabs, and that have obviously connotations, in France, especially in Bordeaux, which is a very conservative city. And the intentions of the city to actually expel all the population and convert this into the typical sort of downtown sort of restructuring. And so Jeanne managed to organize dozens of groups in meetings together and forming amazing coalitions to actually resist this. And again, cutting through all these silos, right? There was absolutely no silo whatsoever. And the other project that she's been working on is the Liverpool project she's been working on for several years. Trying to develop community land trust, cooperative organizations, but most importantly, I think, developing political power, which I think that's, I guess, what. And so if we talk about alternatives to capitalism, I really sincerely think that Jana is one of those persons that can bring us, I mean, I never say that they're there, but certainly there's an enormous tryout for doing that. Now, the other person that I want to present, and he's going to be starting the conversation, is Theodor Szelakowski. Theodor Szelakowski is from Zagreb. Yes, you're from Zagreb? No. Yes, of course, yes. He's looking like that. I had the pleasure of knowing his practice, and I really don't remember where. He was the main organizer of a huge movement in Croatia that was called, Pravo na grad, no? Which means actually the right to the city. No? So he was the organizer, among other people in it, that organized, again, the whole city, more than 50,000 people, if not more, around the corrupt actions of the government at that time, Croatia. And today, I guess, it's still less corrupt, and things don't change too much. Basically, how the government was trying to take over a lot of the public goods, from public spaces to things that belong to the city and the state, that were repartitioning them all over the place. And Theo has, they came with these incredible strategies, and they managed to, again, organize the whole city. And so within these two discussions, the idea of the panel, although Theo had organized a presentation, Jane is the most discussion, but she also is going to put us some slides. It's actually to discuss, and also together with you, if that is a way forward, and how the hell do we do that now? Later today, I just received a call, we also had a representative from the Brooklyn, Crown Heights Tenant Union, which is also another sort of movement here that is beginning to organize larger parts of the city, still in the issue of housing, but slowly growing into other spaces now. So you can talk a little bit more about it if Joe, as you know, the Crown Heights Tenant Union is a horizontal organization, so they went into a meeting and they decided who was going to be representing them. And so I haven't met him, and he called me that he was late, and hopefully he will arrive here and enjoy the conversation. So thank you very much. I hope that I framed more or less what we're going to be discussing today. And Theo, is you. Yeah.
I'll start. I thought to give a presentation about how we moved from the logic of contestation to the logic of institutional innovation. But the first part of the presentation would be just to give you a kind of small narrative, or to give you a picture of development in Zagreb and in Croatia, just to have a kind of, that you have a kind of taste of the size of what we've been doing there for last, let's say, 8 years. What was the whole thing about at the beginning? So we started from the situation in Zagreb, just to have an idea and kind of criteria of the size of the events. We are in Zagreb, we are a city of 750,000 people. And we are like a part of this type of, Austro-Hungarian type of public behavior, in terms of not having at all tradition of confrontation, street protests and stuff like that. So in the last 20 years we had like 2 big protests, one organized by unions during the 90s, and one about one local, very popular radio station. So the ground for organizing people was quite complex. And I want mainly to show you some of the tactics and strategies of organizing stuff within this contestation logic. And the second part about the innovation, institutional innovation, and let's say kind of taking some of the apparatus of the state, we might continue during the discussion. So I'll quickly pass through some few slides, just to understand. This is 6 years of confrontation, more than 50 public actions. So from activists doing certain performances to the white protest having like 5,000 to 6,000 people, and to organizing a petition against certain development in the city. We collected 55,000 signatures against the development of this project. The project was, it was kind of metonymical to us, because it was kind of pars pro toto in Croatian and Zagreb development, urban development, because it started to function as a kind of breaking through into the system of neoliberal dynamics of city development. And the core problem was that for the first time in Croatia we had a situation that the investor, together with the city, that was a kind of course, non-transparent alliance around the adjustment of all of the procedures and even city plan. This development went into the direction of taking public space, the pedestrian zone in the center of the town, into entrance into private garage. So until that time, we had a kind of situation that investors should buy the part of the building, and then to build the entrance into the garage, the private garage, on the land that was bought. And now the situation was opposite. We should invest as in a public infrastructure for this entrance into this garage. On the other side, it was like a totally impossible to develop this type of project, because there were at least 4 lines within the master plan where you can't do, because of the provisions of this master plan, you can't do this. For instance, you can't build in this near center of the town, the close center, you can't build, for instance, private garage. That was a good provision in the city development. It is a very small core of the city, so it is appropriate to have this type of provisions, and it was urbanistically regulated within the master plan. So on the other side, they want to destroy 2 buildings in a historic center of the town that was also prohibited, and they want to invest 100 million euro into the one small block near beautiful city square, Flower Square. So it was kind of a good example to confront the development of the city. And we started campaigning in 2006, even before the project was publicly announced. So it was interesting because this project and we set up a stage of kind of confrontation around some notions of what is public space. And because the whole idea of hybrid spaces within shopping centers and this type of centers as some kind of, even architects and urbanists are pushing this as a new type of public spaces. And we were very strict in confronting this, asking kind of pureness in understanding of public space, because in this type of, as you very well know, in this type of spaces you can't organize yourself, you can't speak publicly, you can't even take picture if it's not allowed by the corporation. So in that sense, that we use the confrontation also to have a kind of a fighting around the notion of public space, and because the opposite side was also pushing the idea of like that the whole project is spreading of the public space. This is a shopping mall, with a parking garage, with a lot of exclusive apartments in the near city, even with a private park. I mean, maybe here in Europe that's something normal. But in Croatia, private parks in this type of conduct, it's totally kind of lunatic. So we are still kind of out of the dynamic that is mainstream everywhere else. So we also fought around this issue because, and even in next fights around golf courses in Dubrovnik and stuff like that, we were always explaining how this exclusiveness of space are cutting some of the most important aspects of what is public in public space. So just to, I'll quickly pass through these pictures of organizing stuff. So you can see that we managed to organize kind of transgenerationally the whole thing. So we gathered like people from all different walk of lives and even kind of from all spectrum of ideological, let's say, positions. So we have from anarchist groups to the people who believe, you know, in better and transparent state, and even those who think that this is ugly or, I don't know, like an ugly project, so on a basically aesthetical level. So it was kind of wide platform of those who were kind of opposing this, and we were successful in gathering all of these people and organization. And I can show you the coalition at the beginning was kind of, we started with this type of performative activities, like we said, total sale, like Zagreb Ltd. So it was kind of confronting the development of the city in this manner of public-private partnerships and development of the city like something what is, you know, purely dealing with investment in and growth and stuff like that. So we were confronting around several of these type of spaces that are waiting for exploitation. And we used some money from campaigning on other issues, and so we did billboards, and we did a lot of stuff on our own without paying, organizing artists. And so what is very important aspect of the development is that we were kind of delivering some kind of a new type of collaboration that was not previously kind of in place in Croatian context, and even, I think, even wider context. That we were starting we call this tactical collectives or tactical platforms, in order not to make this normative term, but more like to describe the logic how we develop stuff. And the basic characteristic of this is kind of cross-sectorial approach of gathering those who are confronting or contesting the certain problem issue or power position. So we brought basically different actors that usually are not, it's not kind of business as usual campaigning of NGOs. So we brought a wide range of organizations, from youth organization, culture organization, the most visible and influential green organization in Croatia and in the region, and independent professionals, urbanists. So we gathered at the beginning, we gathered like a large coalition of those who are involved, and it is important because it moves the logic of organizing a protest and confrontation in direction of kind of making at the beginning kind of political political agreements between those who are not coming from the same field. Because when you work with the people who are in the same field, then or dealing with similar issues, then you usually have the same methods. You usually have the same approaches to things. There is some, most of the things are taken for granted in this type of, and this type of coalitions and platforms make, let's say, they're making, let's say, demand over all of those who are in the process to make a certain political decision. So from this reason, we really don't believe in kind of fetishistic type of structuring the process of confrontation in terms of we have to do like a board making decision or direct democratic process, or it's up to those who are willing to take part in this, who are gathering around this, is up to them to decide all the time again around the methods how is best to go with the action. So in that sense, this is kind of political process of bringing those people in this, on the same table and making decisions together and not having taken for granted anything. So in that sense, these coalitions or platforms, we call them tactical collectives, are something what is really pushing the understanding of all of the actors into a new phase and bringing a new quality of even doing things differently than people usually do. So on the other side, it is necessary to explain that there is a kind of, although these confrontations are dealing with specific projects, the idea of these collectives are to have a kind of long-term political or social goal. So it is not like ad hoc coalition against someone or something. It is like having a wider understanding of a development that ends up in certain type of projects or programs. So in that sense, there are midterm or long-term platforms, and they are not project-based. They are not dependent on money logic, or we do stuff until we have money or we have support, and they rely very much on the development of the movement and inclusion of the citizens in the process. So after gathering these 55,000 of signatures against this project, like I said, it was not possible at all to develop this type of project because of the master plan. At the end, there was actions like typical reclaim the street stuff. Then we said, okay, we want to present or send to the mayor how much signatures we collected and how many people is there. But we said, okay, no, mayor is not listening. So we will present by showing all of these postcards around this block. So we stamped all of these. I mean, it was not 55,000, it was like 25,000. We did it like it was like 7 Zen Buddhistic type of work, 7 days, like 10 people were doing this. And this we surrounded the whole block with these signatures. People signed this card within the petition. Then we continue with pressure, with different public actions, singing in front of the city assembly, changing the name of this very square, because at that time it was the victims of Milan Bandic. This is our populistic mayor. We used even this channel, to confront because he was very popular, and we were the first who were opposing them. And even though the logic of our confrontation is basically on the level of confronting the development of the city, but we use the political dynamics also within the city to go forward. So these people are from different parts of the city where a lot of kind of damages in urban development happened, and they had their specific kind of citizens initiatives. So that was kind of changing the name of the square. And one of the basic characteristics of our kind of present, because we started before the project was announced, so it was on time in that respect. We started to present to the public what would happen. So this is the size of the entrance ramp into the pedestrian zone. So we decided to mark it to people to understand what will happen. And then on the same place, we organized a huge protest. This was like 5,000 people gathered. They were carrying this. They were carrying these letters saying give up. And a lot of move. Then we went to the ministry responsible for our complaints, and we said that this is also a crime scene because they were pretending that they are not part of this. Then we blocked the city assembly with walking on the pedestrian zone. Then we did some surveys where only 8% of people were for the project in the city of Zagreb. Then, parallelly to this, just to explain the way how we try to recreate the political space of kind of, this is not kind of spectacularization or festivization of activities. It is more how to gather people around production of certain event, and that they kind of have a kind of also, let's say, emotional and cognitive aspect of participation in these events. And they started to be very, visible throughout all the media, who were totally against us at the beginning. So we went to the one tycoon home, basically, because he was committed to do the changing of the whole building and renovate the historical site in order, just if it is kind of public space or a hotel. So in that situation, but it was used privately, so we came with the buses as a tourist, and we asked for to check in, and it was kind of showing how they are manipulating with the system. Like one cause is at the beginning, and at the end they change it in a totally private use. So so that was kind of bottling the muddy water with the ingredients of city kind of corrupt and clientelistic development. And this was right before the local elections. And then we had a billboards saying how much money is in this fraudulent thing, and we asked people to go to vote. And then in 2 days we paid for these billboards, but at the end, in 2 days period, they were raised. So we organized the fake start of the work on the place, in order to present to people what will happen after the election, because they stopped for 6 months if they want because of the political development, and then they continue. So we succeeded to postpone the project for 4 years. So then they start illegally, then we blocked this. These containers, we put this in the pedestrian zone, and we organized citizens here to take care of the pedestrian zone. And we organized a huge protest. We built this Trojan horse in order to present how we understand this project, that this is kind of something what will at the future will ruin the logic of how the city is organized, and that and this happened, like they planned for 14 blocks the same development. So the Trojan horse was also metaphoric to the, okay, I'm finishing, it was also kind of metaphoric to the way how the city mayor is running the city, because he is a populistic, but on the other side too much really in favor of a big capital. So we had again a few thousand people here, and okay, arrests. Then we came with like 650 people in front of ministry to complain because 2 years they didn't answer at all. And it is important to explain how we were organized in a logic of groups. So we had like 2,000 people on an SMS service. They said we want to be part of these developments, and we organized this, for instance, in a period of like 12 hours. So 600 something people appear only on an SMS to come in front of the ministry. So we organized in front of the state attorney, to clean the city of Zagreb. Then they started again, tried to start the project. Then we came there to protest. It was the kind of confrontation. We occupied the space. We had like 1 month of different programs and people staying there. This was 2010, so before the program. Then we organized different stuff, like going, asking to put the mayor into jail and stuff like that. So at the end, they arrested 150 people when they again started to work on the construction site. And we had protests in front of main political parties. We even make a wall on one of the ministry because they did this to one of the citizens in the block. They put like a wall in front of his window, and then we presented that this is coffin with public interest. This is already built, the entrance ramp, Republic of Prussia. We were using a lot of these, toward the state, the logic of transparency, corruption, because this is part of, what is understood locally as a process of, transformation and, having rights. And then this is the opening of the center. We said total fraud. Opening with massive police presence, and it ended with a total kind of mess there. And just as we lost this battle, we succeeded in downsizing the project, but we had some, let's say, systematic successes in terms of changing the master plan in order not to be kind of not having these provisions that allows all of these negative stuff. So we brought it back to the previous stage. On the other side, we started in Croatia and several different places these type of confrontations, and we established kind of new layer of citizens activism, and we call this Prostorna Pravda, the special justice movement. This started to be a political, the space started to be a huge on a huge level of on a political and social agenda, and we started to be visible as a political actors. And for the future activities around different, even larger things, we started to collaborate with unions, and we started to to really influence the dynamic what is in Croatia perceived as the politics or what is understood as a citizen's action. Thank you very much.
Okay, so as I mentioned in the intro, we have a representative of the Crown Heights Tenant Union, Joel. He's going to discuss a little bit about development, etc. Joel, try to stay around 5-10 minutes or so if you can.
Thank you for having me. My name is Joel Fungal. I'm from the Crown Heights Tenant Union. We're a relatively new group. We began about a year and a half ago out of efforts that came through Occupy Wall Street and other networks that were in the neighborhood. The idea is to use to build one big union of tenants associations in the neighborhood around a sort of standard set of demands. We're demanding a 5-year rent freeze. We're demanding quality of renovations such that, where landlords are using vacant apartments to, put in all the stainless steel and marble that people want and then jack up the rent $6,000. We're saying, there has to be a quality of access to those materials, the same high quality of renovation throughout the building. So we think that we've identified some of the ways in which real estate capital is displacing long-term residents, Black, West Indian, Latino residents of Crown Heights. And we see this as a sort of cycle of exploitation where long-term residents are displaced, new residents are then moved in at inflated rents, frequently illegally high rents above the stabilized rents. And we think that by building a union of long-term Black, West Indian, Latino residents and newer residents, that we can break that cycle. We're using a collective bargaining strategy, so we're demanding a tenant union contract. The idea is that this would be legally binding in a way that community benefits agreements and other models haven't been in the past. And this has been sort of the general approach. So far, we have had one major mobilization at Union Street in Franklin, in Brooklyn, in Crown Heights. This was led by the tenants of the building alongside members of other locals in the tenant union. And we were able to win some renovations in that building for long-term residents. And it's been a successful effort so far. Insofar as we have been able to build a base, we are now mobilizing for a June 7th demonstration that's going to be very large. It's going to be sort of a march through the neighborhood, led by residents of the neighborhood. And we're going to sort of end with a picnic and barbecue. But along the way, we're going to be hitting a number of buildings and problematic real estate brokers and sort of telling people what our demands are, first of all, and second of all, what they've been doing to people who've been living in the neighborhood 40, 50, 60 years. So we are trying to confront power directly. We are making demands directly on power. And we're also making demands that, if they are met, will probably result in certainly the stabilization of the community, but also in significantly diminished, if not eliminated, profit margins for some of these landlords. We're working with UHAB, which is it's a tenants' rights organization. It's been around for, I know that Rob works with them a lot too. Been around for about 40 years, and they sort of specialize in converting buildings that have gone into foreclosure into co-ops. This is not a conversation that we've had sort of internally in the union yet, but what our long-term demand is, sort of speaking to what you were mentioning earlier, how we are sort of challenging capital as a system overall, is a very difficult question, I think, actually, with the land question or with real estate overall. You look at models like TIL or models like HDFC, sort of low-income, limited equity co-ops. That's a good model, sort of, it appears, certainly for the first round of tenants it is, absolutely. Then when these buildings sort of age out of the program, if it's the TIL program, or when these units in an HDFC are sold, or when the building is removed from HDFC, then they're $1 million units. And so that model has been problematic, I think. And now I'm just sort of thinking aloud. But Mitchell Lama is a great program. Mitchell Lama is a great program. Yeah. So maybe, if it's okay, what we could do with this, the maybe 2 minutes that I have left, is I maybe wanted to open it up to what people think. What do you think a long-term solution? Obviously, this is, I'll report whatever people think back to our group. It will inform, but certainly not decide what our group is going to do. But what do people think is the long-term demand for housing or land? What do people think is the long-term demand?
Perhaps we can pose that at the end of Jenna's presentation as the start of, one of the start questions.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good.
Yeah.
So I guess to review, we're pursuing a collective bargaining strategy. We've had some small successes, and we hope to continue to grow. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me, Miguel. Thank you for the introduction, but it made me inflate almost as big that I would sail off, I think, outside. So I put some, can I? The other one. So, no, it's okay. It's okay. What's presented? No, I need the other one. I need the short one. Here, try to narrow it down in like 3-4 minutes so we can have a conversation, which I think is also important. So, diagrams only. So not showing you images, it's just showing you some diagrams. And then does somebody know how to put it on presenter mode?
Put the slideshow and then from the beginning. Click on slideshow at the top. And then from the beginning all the way up to the left.
No, it doesn't give presenter mode?
The one that split the screen.
That you see your slides? Or that you see your notes also?
Software.
It's on. It's on.
Huh? Then I have to do it on the top of my head. I don't have my notes, which makes it interesting. Huh? Yeah, so it's okay. I can do it on the top of my head, I think. If not, then. So, I think talking about, I think one of the conditions Miguel was mentioning, which is fragmentation of our cities, which I think is one of the problems that makes people really feel left out of the spaces where they live. And they feel left out in a way, I think, that they no longer can imagine to have any say in the way in which their daily environment is shaped, formed, financed, governed in any way. So you see currently a big disconnect between people and forms of state, if you want, or form of governing. And I think this is a condition that, especially in most of the areas I work with, that has far-reaching consequences. Like, as one of the people in one of the projects in Anfield in Liverpool very eloquently say, basically we are sick. Sick of the waiting for something to come, sick of the waiting for something to change. And we no longer feel in any way capable of what you would call taking matters into our own hands, having any say in how things are shaped or formed in our cities, or in any way have a say in maybe how our future is designed or projected for us. And I think this sick of the waiting is an interesting condition, you could say, of our contemporary capitalist cities, is that most of our spaces have become abstract spaces, which people no longer feel they have any connection to. So it leads in quite often in neighborhoods to a big so-called depoliticization of people. People have a form of apathy. They no longer even know how to organize around certain issues, or they don't even feel the urge to organize anymore. there are no jobs, there is bad healthcare, there are no good schools, nothing is happening anymore. So it doesn't matter. So this was in the slide Miguel yesterday showed also, like, you know, that a lot of people feel there's nothing left to live for. And this is a big condition of our time. So how do you organize? How do you organize again, or people on the ground, and rebring sort of interest in their daily environment, and also in their public forms of engaging, and like Theodore shows, in a way to actually also become active citizens again, starting to act out in their own surroundings and starting to act up in order to take part again. So this I think is a very difficult thing to do, especially as some of the urban conditions groups are living under are complex in itself. And as Miguel was also saying, like, okay, we can organize around certain unions for work, or cooperatives around housing, or even social institutions for care or mental health. But how to connect all these different organizations that work on something as simple as the right to live well, whatever that might mean, which is the combined necessity of both housing, schooling, working, and this is not very easy. For instance, if you take, and I put only some diagrams of how we try to organize it. If you take the Afrikaner district in the south of Rotterdam, you see something very interesting happening. You see the city center, and the city center is sort of developing, with the idea of the creative city is sort of encroaching upon the south of Rotterdam. And the south of Rotterdam is on the other side of the river, and they always see the gray triangle is the head of the south, or if people say the S of the center, it's how you look at it. But the south goes way down into the cellar. But the way the city represents Rotterdam, the city of Rotterdam, is that part is never shown. And all the speculation and all the development that is sort of like, how will that land in an area like the Afrikaner district, which is an area which is completely social housing, which has a mixed population of, at the moment, 80% non-Dutch, which is made of a very different nationality, which has an unemployment of over 60% at the moment, and poverty index below 34, people living below poverty index. And we're talking about the Netherlands here, which is and this is a diagram of all the forms of organizing that we have tried to do in the neighborhood over the last 6-7 years. And here you see all the legislations and all the policy in that line that basically prevent, in one way or another, people in the area to take part in the decisions of the area or in the development of the area. If it's about work, about health, about public space, about building. Here you see some of the way we think new economic flows in the neighborhood could be organized. But most strongly, what you see here is a whole middle row of activities, which are, like you say, acts of civil disobedience, form of small-scale collaborations in forms of worker co-ops, in forms of thematic cooperation. And I really like what you said yesterday. We talk a lot about land trusts, about co-ops, but I think it's not about the vehicle, it's about trying new forms of collectivity. Trying new forms of collectivity, use them, alter them, change them, make them work for a while. If they're not working anymore, just chuck them out. We've been trying to do that. We did a lot of different things, trying in various ways to organize people first about thematic principles like energy or food or clothes, but more strongly trying to combine this different energy in what we call the top layer. And the top layer is thinking about how we can actually create a netted cooperative structure in which different associations, different forms of participation from shopkeepers to companies are possible. And as you see, that structure, almost like an umbrella, could take over some form of governing in the area. And why is that important? Because it's an area that, as I said, is under a lot of pressure, so there is still a lot of money coming towards the area. but it goes into NGOs, it goes into a lot of organizations that try to manage poverty or job creation or stuff like that, but it's never managed by the people themselves. So how can we actually cut out that whole structure of middle organizations that distributes money and organize it in a way that the people of the area are the ones that also going to manage this money. So we're not there yet, we're struggling with it, legally struggling with it, also because we don't maybe want to be state apparatus, or as you say like that, how can we create a governing body in one way or another that consists of particles that are netted through an understanding of solidarity, because they have to live in the same territory. So it's a solidarity based on territorial things and not just on a thematic like work. So how we do that with so many different people, I mean, we are quite far. We have at the moment loads of members of the new structure, but we're still struggling with the difference in, like you said, political background, religious background, and how to do that. But more strongly, what we struggle with also is building again capacity to self-manage, to self-organize, but also capacity to politicize, capacity to take up also the political role to fight the existing structures. And I think Miguel also talked about Bordeaux, and there, for instance, that was a very excellent example of the fact that a small area of roughly 19,000 inhabitants had 105 associations, dealing 105 on one on like 5 square miles. So, you know, it's like really a very small territory that all dealt with different issues that were all siloed, that sometimes were in the same street and never spoke to each other. So the association for anti-racist association was next to the rights for migrants, and they never ever spoke to each other. They all dealt horizontally with power, vertical with power, direct related with power, in this case with the Minister of Juppé, where they tried to get as much money for their organization to survive. They never, in somewhere or other, organized horizontally. And I think this organizing horizontally to cover the territory, I think is very, very, very important. So what does that need? I think if you look at Enfield and some of the situations there where they decided to demolish the whole area, which ended up in loads of like really blight and displacement, where one of these people said like we were sick of the rating. I think what that needs, that sort of horizontal organizing, I think is something what I understand now or was thinking about yesterday is also a sort of like horizontal organizing of your 4 principles of the state. So I think we have to keep thinking about what I call repetitive insertion. Repetitive going back and inserting forms of conflict, forms of confrontation. Preparing all together to take up the fight when necessary. But we also have to do something else, because you cannot be, like we discovered that in Liverpool, you cannot be constant ready for the fight. Because you also need sometimes just to spend time on livelihood, on your family, on living well. So how can we create loopholes in the system that allow for some kind of like co-managed, co-created forms of livelihood, where people, while they're doing that, while they're living their lives, prepare for struggle. So can we create a network of what I call them sleeper cells. People that live and work and try to collectively get a sort of understanding from the place where they are. But how can we net them horizontally in a way that whenever it's needed, they're ready to pick up the fight? And if you're more than one, if you're many of those, I think we can surely at some point make a difference. For how long? That's always the question. But like I said, I believe that repetition, it's an again and 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 again. So please, again.
I mean, part of the idea, which I guess the idea always never gets to materialize, is we have a few minutes of discussions. Again, I believe that all of you posed in many ways on the form of organizing that are discussing a different scale, different scale of operation. I mean, in your case, Theo, I mean, even though you organized around a very specific thing, but it was very clear for you that that specific thing represented everything. I mean, everything that was going on around, and you actually had success not only on that thing, but like the house, like that house actions. I mean, you started to move way beyond any sort of form of thematic representation. I mean, this was about what the basically the current state, the forms of governance were doing. You know? And in many ways, the actions that you took tried to really work at that level. You know? I mean, at the whole structural stuff. I mean, in your case, Johnny, I think it just talks the same. I mean, it's really sad that we never have time to really discuss the details of the projects. We're talking about thousands of people involved in them in many ways, in many different things. And one thing that really resounded me today, and this is also part of the tenant union, is that even though tenant union is quite young, right? And when we hear about these projects, we're talking about years and years and years of constant repetition, as you say now. That neither of these projects is something like, you know, the success happens at once. Every time I get to meet Janet, which thankfully I get to meet her, well, I wish I meet more often, but I meet her at least twice a year, 2 times a year or so. She's just like, you know, we had this huge problem, we don't know how to deal with it. And the next time I meet with her, it's like, okay, we managed to deal with that problem, right? And some of them you haven't managed, you know. But what I actually think is very important, and it's extending a little bit on the discussion of yesterday, is how all of these organizations start also to intervene on the state apparatus in a way that normal organization, the side organization, hasn't. I mean, we were discussing the other day that because of a lot of the development, right now they're in this sort of condition where they might actually enter into politics or not politics, and you know that's part of the discussion. And I know by definition that Jan's work, it's without entering into the political space, and not the political that we wish for, the politics, the dirty politics. Most of the things that you've done will never happen, you know. So one of the things that impressed me the most is that Jane at some point got elected as a member of the Rotterdam Council, City Council, something like that. What was that? You had a public position within. Okay, sorry.
Makes everything bigger.
Yeah. Okay. So she's going down, but that she's okay. But anyway, she's always there trying to discuss with politicians, you know, and creating a lot of noise, and actually she's hated quite a lot by a lot of people around it. And that was the same as you were, you know, it was a direct confrontation with the state, but at the same time, you were presenting another form of organizing, you know, of another form of governance, if I should say, presenting a different ways of dealing with the situation. So I see in these two projects, you know, like the possibility of making us rethink, you know, how we are really organizing, how the efficacy of our actions are actually determining, vis-a-vis, of course, the perverse sort of expansions of the capitalist system. And in the case of the Crown House Tenant Union, I mean, it's an incredible phenomenon. It has picked up amazingly, I think, in media, as you know. I mean, the moment that they get into the New York Times, is like everybody talks about them, and then you got it in the New York Times, right? And I'm not sure if that's good or bad or anything, but no, in many ways it's really good because you're getting the visualization of actually a serious problem here. And I think it's one of the very few organizations that I know that have come out of the Occupy that are declaring levels of organization that are at a neighborhood level, a very different scale. And what I mentioned is that beyond sort of the issues of housing and tenants, that there's starting, I mean, I would like you to talk about it, other forms of organizing towards other sort of issues that become apparent within, you know, the structures of the tenant union. And then again, of course, we can recall larger scale operations like Sandy or etc. that were very focused, of course, on relief efforts, you know, and very peculiar sort of emergency type of situations. In your case, you're for the long run. And also are, I think, an epitome or some good representation of what might, in the future, hopefully, will be called, you know, the configuration of urban unions as a way of really redefining city growth. So, if you want to make any comments about this, I mean, just very, very briefly, and then we'll open up to the audience. We have briefly 10, 15 minutes to do this, and I will try to keep it on there. Theo, I know you want to.
Yes, basically there was a lot of critique on the usual suspects of NGOs and who are dealing with campaigns. We were in this process. We were investigating how it is possible to use these institutions into the process of massive involvement and self-organization of the citizens. And that's, I think we shouldn't go into, if, like, first lecture yesterday was around the issue of hybridization, not thinking about only the purity of our approach, too much of ideological pushing onto the organizational structure or morality in terms of pureness and stuff like that. I think we should go beyond those who are our immediate surrounding in that sense. And working with unions, for instance, is a really kind of tough job to do in terms of moving together with them in some new stage. But on the other side, persistent conflict could be maintained for several years only if you build institutions or rely on some institutions. And if you have a specific dynamic of bringing different institutions into the process where you are not relying on solo dynamic of one of them, you can make a new type of kind of experience where there is interdependence and where the dynamic of each of these institutions couldn't prevail. So in that sense, all the different type of and formats of confrontations should be examined through the political process of bringing all of those people together. And we don't have to underestimate them. People are also seeing, even though they might not read about critical theory and stuff like that, they see unjust development of nowadays, and they are radicalizing and they are moving into direction, and they have professional skills, they have resources. That's the reason why, for instance, Right to the City could be kind of dynamic tactical group that relies on different fights to different sources. So we don't have to do projects in order to maintain the confrontation. We want to avoid projects in order to be kind of fast in moving direction and finding the new confrontation layers. Nowadays, we, for instance, fighting around the privatization of highways, of 1,000 kilometers of highways within newly built in Croatia, and we are doing this with the one specific union of people who are working in this public company. And this is for the first time that the civil society could enter into the type of representation that is not this type of liberal democratic state where there is exact place for NGOs, they do institutional fight, changes of policies and stuff like that, and nothing with building a constituency or grassroots stuff. This is really moving, and unions are also in the same situation of necessity to go into that direction. And this is really interesting experience. And as I want to point out, it's the first time this type of civil society organizing stuff is going into direction, having voice, not for the minorities, not to the logic of universal logic of protecting minorities, but to the protecting the majority of the, fighting for the majority of the population, because majority of the population are suffering and are meant to be excluded from the process of deciding, influencing, or taking part in using of resources. And that's the second layer we've been developing, and that's not the case that we can explain it here. But how to reclaim the public, how to, so one thing is to rely on institution, build institution in order to maintain the longer fight. That's one issue. But the other issue is how to build new public institutions that we call this kind of common in the public institution in terms of opening it for co-governance, for the different logic of, because nowadays they are privatized in terms either of having political control, or the answer to this is let's privatize it, let's sell them or give a concession on these resources. And nowadays we are fighting against privatization and concession in Europe. Waste management companies, water companies, privatization of public infrastructure. But on the other side, we are proposing a model of how to make a co-governance logic over these resources, and for instance, over the social culture centers. And we are pushing even some institutional mechanism. For instance, European Commission has the European finances, European Social Fund, something like that is a name, and we are pushing to have and there is a decision, political decision, to give, for instance, 20 million euros into the process of making a network of social culture centers that will be organized in a way and maintain this resource in a self-management phase. So where those who are practitioners and users of the space are governing over the space. So we shouldn't be afraid of any means, of interaction with the system, being frightened that we will be spoiled. We should fight for the resources and try to change the logic how they are governed. And because nowadays people are needing these resources. So, final solution, we'll see. But nowadays people are losing and they have to fight back for these resources.
I think you have to sort of start from people's lived conditions and what's happening, what people are confronting in the buildings. When you organize an urban space, you're organizing with human beings, and they know their own problems. So in buildings that we've been organizing in, we see people who've been in the building for 40, 50 years, who are being called 5 or 6 times a day, being offered paltry sums of money to move out, so they're being harassed. And next door, their sort of 26-year-old white neighbor who's just moved in 3 months ago is being charged $6,000 to $7,000. Living with 7 roommates in this tiny apartment that's been cut up and renovated. And it doesn't seem to either of those people that they're confronting the same problem, but they're confronting the same problem from the same source, which is the landlord, which is real estate capital. And so I think it's about drawing those connections of solidarity that are not immediately apparent, but as soon as they are sort of pointed out, as soon as people meet in their lobby, they realize they have the same target as the landlord, they realize it's the same system, this sort of game system of rent stabilization, which is of course we all know a weakened form of rent control, and solutions start to emerge, common demands start to emerge, and then we have a target, we have demands, and we just fight, and that's what the tenant union is about.
So I will open it up for just one round of questions. If you might have some questions and some observations to comment. Yes. So do you mind going into the mic over there? Yes.
You can we're so close that this thing doesn't.
Yeah, I was wondering, with Crown Heights Tenant Union, since we talked a little bit about sort of the militarization of cities also, and I was kind of the police state we kind of living in. And I was wondering, there was that connection between NYPD abuses and gentrification, and Crown Heights, of course, is one of those areas. So Was wondering if you're also kind of working on those mutual or those connected issues of gentrification and NYPD abuses?
Definitely. I mean, so there's sort of two ways to answer the question. One is the sort of, what is the campaign, what are the demands, and how do we organize around that? And the other is, what is the connection? So I'll start with what is the connection, at least that I personally, and incidentally, everything that I'm saying today is not coming organizationally, it's just coming from me personally. So I'm not speaking for the tenant union at all today, speaking personally. But the issue of how police presence and gentrification is, well, certainly when we see a sort of cherry picker, ghetto tower, NYPD installation on the corner of Pacific and Nostrand, and directly across the street there's a stretch of new bars and restaurants. That is not that's not abstract. That is easy to see. And in terms of how we've been organizing, the Crown Heights Tenant Union came out of the Crown Heights Assembly, which was descended from Occupy Wall Street, and we engaged in a lot of sort of stop and frisk, anti-stop and frisk activity, but also Cop Watch, which is a model some of you may be familiar with, Malcolm X grassroots movement, and a number of other groups have been doing it for decades. And so you organize a group of neighborhood residents who know their rights, stick together, they bring a camera and observe the police surveilling the community, trying to make it safer for Capitol, and you're doing the opposite. That's one of the ways in which we try to target that nexus of state and capital power. The tenant union so far has not. That was an earlier effort, and I think it's an important question. It's an important question. We're confronting it now when we're trying to get a permit for this park. Is the state going to let us use the park? Hopefully, I hope so. I believe so.
Rob?
Yeah, so a question for Teo and a question for Joel. Teo, for you, particularly around policing also, what has been the response? It looks like from the slides you've shown us that police response has ramped up and you guys have become more active. What has been that response with respect to arresting people? Have there been larger numbers of arrests? And has the legal community come to work with you guys, particularly on a pro bono basis? And then for Joel, the question for you would be, yesterday we talked a lot about confronting the state, and being that the tenants union was born out of Occupy, which usually rejected anything to do with the state, you guys right away connected with Urban Homesteading Assistance Board, which has, in the past, moved the state to do things that the state necessarily didn't want to do. So I was wondering how that happened.
Yes, we had a huge support of, this is not community, but some 10 to 15 lawyers. And it was like, we had a tough time around this because it was like, it was around 20,000 euros. It was the fines they were trying to sue us for, and we managed, after the fall of the previous government, where they were very kind of fast in dealing with this. Nowadays, we succeeded to postpone stuff, we do complaints and stuff like that, and it was, nowadays they are rejecting the police suing us on this. So it was like 150 people were charged with, for instance, 100 euro. And on the other side, we as the organizers, it was like we were charged with my colleague and me with 2,500 euros, 2,500 euros, and each of us. And it was really so fast, it was like a political process because the Minister of Police was pushing us, the whole apparatus was against us. The mayor, the ministry, the Minister of Police, and it was really interesting because we had to develop a dynamic of counter-fighting these situations. For instance, the Green Organization was put on court for one action. They used the color cans in order to show question mark what is happening with some issue, okay, ecological issue, environmental issue, and what happened. Ministry put them on court because of dumping the dangerous waste in the nature. This was totally stupid. And yes, there was support, but at the end we lacked the support for this urbanistic type of stuff.
Mary, how are we doing on the time? We're fine. Okay, good. Good, sure. Who needs to answer? Yeah, please, Joe, you want to answer?
I'm sorry to ask this question, actually. This is a question for the young lady from the Netherlands. I'm not very well traveled for today's standards, and I've never been to the Netherlands. But I understand you have a set of levies that work, like, right? I mean, it's something about the water level and the setting up the levees, so they actually work, right? Or am I in the wrong place? Yeah. And so I was trying to follow that, and when you were doing your presentation, I know you're an artist, but I got distracted. It felt like you were like an anthropologist. Like you were talking about, this is really the truth. This is really what I heard, something about the people who are non-Netherlanders are hidden somewhere in African land. And it sounded like you were saying you're trying to unearth them because they're doing some interesting things and you'd like to expose those things. Like there was a slide before this one that looked like a kind of a matrix decision tree or something, and I was trying to find the non-Netherlanders there. Aren't you talking about did you say they were 80% non-Netherlanders? And you found them? And they're doing good things? Is that right? They're in African land.
Yeah, I mean...
What's the name of the place? I'm sorry, I don't speak Dutch.
It's called...
Afrikaans.
Afrikaner district, yeah.
Yeah, Afrikaner district.
But that's the name, that's because of that's just the name that's given
because
to
they're
the
not,
streets.
because they're non-Netherlanders,
No,
right?
that had nothing to do with
Oh,
it.
I'm sorry, I got confused.
So,
I'm so sorry.
yeah, I know, I think what you're getting at, but I think to be very precise, like the district has that name, like in the whole south of Rotterdam there are different districts, that's the name of the district, like you have Queen Heights, and the name of the district is that name, officially, like it's part of Feyenoord and it has other districts as well, like it's the same like Crown Heights, as a name. What?
I heard you say something about most people don't know that they're there.
No, I didn't say that. Huh?
There's a slide before this one where you have a big matrix there.
Sorry, I think what you're trying to get at, but in that sense I think you are packing up a lot of like uninformed information on top of each other to get to a so the name of the district has nothing to do with the fact that are living, let's say, people of non-Dutch origin. That's how we call it, because we have a different, let's say, migration setup, like for instance, or a different setup of migration than you have here in America. The situation is completely different, also in its makeup. So we have, for instance, in the Afrikaner district, we have a mix of what we call, what you would call former colonial, so that with us is Suriname, Antillean, Aruba, so the ABC Islands and that. And the other mix is recent migration, or let's say migration over the last 25, 30 years, which is predominantly Turkish, Moroccan. So this is a mix we have there, and that mix together with some Asian that has been originally there, because it's the area is called Afrikaner district because it was the Afrikaner harbor. It was the harbor where most of the trade from Africa came. So we have, so that's why the area is called like that. It is part of the south, and the south is a part where the harbors are, so it has been always the place where the migrants, but also in the earlier days, for instance, people from the south of the Netherlands came there to work. So it's always been the area where people that started to work in the harbor came living. And with that, it came first the migration from the south of the Netherlands, then the migration from the south of Europe, and then the migration from the rest of the world. So that's the condition on the place. So no. But I live there, so.
I just thinking about some type of apartheid or Israel stuff or something like that, but you're not.
No, I'm not thinking about that.
I mean, I think the question speaks to how do we build organizations, right? And who leads organizations, and also on what basis is solidarity constructed. I think that solidarity has to be constructed on mutual benefit and mutual victory, and also the ways in which the system is pitting us against each other. So, I mean, I think, in the case of Crown Heights, there has been, to some extent, we know the history of the neighborhood, right? So, it's about how do we regain the common humanity through imagining, and not so much imagining, but identifying common oppression, even if it looks different and is differently enacted on different people, right? So the fact that someone's being charged $7,000 for a rent-stabilized apartment, which is actually $1,500, is not as severe or as real an oppression as someone being kicked out of their apartment that they lived in for 50 years. But the fact is that those come from the same source. And so in seeing the ways in which the same source is oppressing us, we can reclaim some kind of common humanity through the way that we fight, I hope.
And I think that I want to add on it, and that's why I gave the example of the Afrikaner wijk, is that if you don't organize specifically around a thematic like work or housing, and if you want to organize around a territory or a part of a city in order to create strength, then you have to confront the fact that all these different groups that are there, including the people that are so-called original Dutch, that they not necessarily all, and that's I agree with sorry, Joel, but also with that they not all necessarily have the same interest, or that they not necessarily all have the same political orientation or the same religious orientation. So, for instance, in the Afrikaner district, the difference between, for instance, the Suriname community and the Moroccan community or the Turkish community can't be more different at some points towards political orientation, religious orientation, and even family orientation. So if you then want to organize them not around a thematic like work or social care or whatever, but towards a territory, to collectively care again for their territory, to reclaim the right to have a say in how the machinery around the territory is operating, or the state is operating, you have to think of different ways of forming coalitions. And you have to sort of like find a way to ask people to practice forms of citizenships. I think that's also what you've been doing, is to practice forms of citizenship together in a solidary way, where we can sort of like together find what you say human unities. You call it urban unities, but human unities in which we do reclaim back some of these rights and some of the money that's still flowing through the areas in order to create a livelihood for all. And that's not only racial oriented, that's not only financially oriented, that's not only work oriented. I think we have to find a way to create these connections. And to also sometimes, I think, but this is my opinion, and probably that's a European opinion, forgive me for that, is to surpass sometimes also some of these very linear discourse about what is the right way to do something. So I agree with you, we have to find different urban unions to basically fight the system, And for that we maybe need to work together with people that might not necessarily be natural to us. That can also be politically not natural to us. It doesn't have to be racial or whatever, but it means different. Try to create different urban alliances. And I think it's super important we do that, because we have to find different ways of fighting back, I should say. I think it's extremely important.
So we're really running out of time, so you can...
Yes, I'll do this quickly. I wanted to quickly note that the community land trust model that Max Rambeau spoke of yesterday offers something which actually, I'm not sure why he didn't really describe, he mentioned it very quickly. The governance structure, this is when I worked on land trust years ago, unless it's changed. The governance structure was a tripartite structure consisting of the residents, other local stakeholders, immediate neighbors, and then a broader set of stakeholders who would be people working on the broader issues of housing, human rights, or whatever. It's a very important and insightful model because it speaks to the immediate issue of today, which is how to foster these linkages which are not so narrow and siloed, right? So you can bring in various players who are all around in a place-based sort of way, focused on the city with this common goal. It also speaks to the other issue which came up yesterday a number of times about how do we guard against the insularity and the problematic nature of reform as we provide immediate service and improvement for people, but protect against them feeling like what they've got their narrow self-interest met, and therefore they don't continue in a revolutionary, transformative way. By having that type of model, which has both the immediate stakeholders and beneficiaries, plus broader stakeholders, it speaks to a number of these things, as well as meeting Joel's point about how do you ensure long-term affordability, because you're not just looking at the most immediate people with a vested interest, saying, oh, now we'll flip it later on. So I think that model speaks to a number of things here which I think is insightful.
Yes, thank you. Please be very short, but we really need to.
Although I very much appreciate this logic of commoning around the resources, I think, and building alliances, different alliances, wide alliances around contestations and stuff like that, I think we shouldn't lose from our mind the idea of reclaiming the public. So I would suggest that within our thinking and practicing, we try also models that are inclusive or building institutionalized type of governing over the resources that includes the layers of public governance within this. So that, for instance, in the governing of this type of social culture centers that are pushing the network that we have also in these boards, for instance, that we have also representatives of the local political...
That third tier of land trust, by the way, is meant to be open and inclusive of that, so that government representatives could be...
I'm not familiar with that model, but so that we don't build, islands apart from the logic that dominantly exists, but let's say to build the formats that doesn't allow the domination of this type of vertical control. But we need things, and we need to reclaim the public institutions also, and to open them in that sense.
The last one.
Really briefly, I just wanted to say that the land trust model is amazing, and it is operating very well on the Lower East Side. Cooper Square is it's remarkable. They've got all hundreds, if not thousands, of apartments that artists and others have been able to live in since the 70s, 80s. But it is this insular thing that becomes a business, right? Which is neither good nor bad, but it's not a struggle, right? And I think that's difficult. I think what my personal idea is that we have to fight for a new form of public housing. We have to have public housing. We need to get past private ownership. We need to have community control, but we need a new form of public housing.
That's a great way of finishing this. Thank you very much, all.
Thank you, presenters. Friends, although we're behind, I still want to take a short break now because the tamales have arrived. I would like to ask the speakers for the next panel to be the first people to approach the tamales so that they're able to eat and get back here to present, and then others can cycle through.